Hi, this is Bill Punch. This video is one of a series of videos used to support Michigan State University's Introduction to Computer Science using Python CSE 231. This is the second in a series of videos on selection. We'll call it Selection 2. Let's get started. So we saw already in the previous video the basic idea of a compound expression and our first control structure. For an if statement, we're going to look at a second version of a if statement called the if-else statement, and here it is. The way we interpret this is we actually have two compound statements here. The first is the if statement and its indented suite. The second is an associated else statement and its associated suite. So two compound statements together, two different suites located in the same expression. And the way we interpret it is as follows. We evaluate the single Boolean expression. Notice there's no Boolean expression here with the else statement. If the Boolean expression is true, then we execute this suite. If the Boolean expression is false, we execute this suite. Either the expression is true or false, and so either we execute suite 1 or suite 2, but not both, only one of them. And then, as before, whichever one is evaluated, we continue on with the rest of our Python statements and see what happens. So an example would look something like this. Here we have an integer, myint equals 27, and a divisor that has a value of 3. And essentially what we want to do is we're going to check to make sure the divisor is not a 0 value, because in that case, if it's a 0 value, we can't do division. We'd get an error. So in the situation where we have a divisor equal to 0, we simply print a result statement saying, hey, can't do it. If it's not true that the divisor is equal to 0, we can perform the operation and we print the result. Either way, either we execute this suite or this suite, and then we pick up with the remainder of our Python suite starting here. So let's go ahead and try it with 27 and 3. We see that the divisor int is not a 0 value, so we roll and execute the else statement and we get a result. If we go up and then change the value to 0 and execute it, we see that we execute the true part, can't divide by 0. Either way, both times we executed the moving on statement afterwards. A third variation is the following. We have a series of control expressions. We have the very first expression, a Boolean, and its associated suite, followed by a new control word called elif, and its associated Boolean expression and another suite. And then we can have as many elifs as we want. If Boolean expression, then suite 1. Elif, Boolean expression 2, suite 2. Elif, Boolean expression 3, suite 3. As many as we want. And finally then, at the very end, an else statement, no Boolean expression, and the last suite. So we can have as many Boolean expressions in order, and the interpretation of this as follows. We execute the Boolean expressions one at a time until we find one that's true. The first true expression, we execute its associated suite, and then we skip the rest of the else statement and pick up with the Python expressions that come at the end of the statement. If it's the case that no Boolean expression comes up true, then we execute the else. And so in this case, where no Boolean is true, then we execute the else statement. So we are going to execute one of the suites in this expression. The first Boolean expression that becomes true, or if no Boolean expression is true, the else suite. And that's the evaluation there. And so let's look at an example. Here's a slightly expanded version of our little program. We say, hey, the dividend, we're going to divide 27 by some divisor. We're going to check for two possibilities. If the divisor is 0, we can't do that, and what we will do is we will execute this suite of statements, skip the rest, and pick it up here. If the divisor is equal to 1, we execute these two statements. We say dividing is a waste of time, and we give back the original. Skip the else part, pick it up down here. If it's not 0, and if it's not 1, then we execute the else statement. No Boolean expression was true. We execute the associated else statements, and then pick it up where we left off. Let's go ahead and test this out. Let's start with our divisor equal to 0 and execute that. You say, hey, the divisor is 0. You can't divide by 0. Run the program with a non-zero, and we hit the moving on, just like we said. So we executed these three statements. We skipped the rest of the else, picked it up with moving on. That's what we got. Let's change it to 1. Evaluate that. The first Boolean turned out to be false, so we didn't execute any of this. The second Boolean turned out to be true. We executed these two statements. We skipped the else, and then we picked it up at the end. That's exactly what we got. Kind of a waste of time, division by 1. If we change it to another value, let's say 3, execute that. The first Boolean was false, so we didn't do those. The second Boolean was false, so we didn't do those. None of the Booleans were true, so we do the two statements in the if statement, and then we pick it up at the end.